Hi there, everybody. This is the Queso You Didn't Know podcast. As always, this is Queso, and I'm joined by the fabulous co host.
Roberto Simpson.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a hell of a story for you today. One that involves a man that I think really deserves a bigger place in history than we give him. Mr. Robert Smalls, 1839 to 1915, stands as one of the most consequential figures in American history, embodying the volatile transition from slavery to citizenship and the transformative potential of the Reconstruction era. Born enslaved in the South Carolina Low Country, Small's trajectory encompasses three distinct and highly influential careers. First, he was a self-emancipator and Civil War hero whose daring seizure of the Confederate steamer CSS Planter forced a critical shift in Union military policy regarding black enlistment. Second, he emerged as a principal architect of progressive state policy during Reconstruction, pioneering measures such as free compulsory public education and land reform in South Carolina. Third, Smalls demonstrated extraordinary resilience by maintaining a position of political and federal authority well into the Jim Crow period. The enduring nature of Small's influence derived from a unique combination of factors: the technical mastery he acquired while enslaved, particularly his expertise as a pilot, and his deep cultural and political connection to the Gullah community of the Low Country. These assets allowed him to serve as a pivotal bridge between the incoming federal power structures and the newly freed populace. His life story is not merely a chronicle of personal achievement, but a definitive illustration of the successes and subsequent systematic repression faced by black leaders throughout the latter half of the 19th century. In this first half of this tale, we're going to cover his humble origins and his Civil War hero era. And then on part two, we'll get right into him becoming a politician and how he uses that war hero status to really help change certain structures in the South for the better.
Robert Smalls is definitely a name that rings bells. Like you said, deserves more light, so to speak. And I know for a fact he existed within the Reconstruction era because between me and you, when I saw that you shot this link over to me, when I thought about the name Robert Smalls, also thought about the name John Brown, also existing within the same time roughly. And to know that he has ties to the Gullah community. And I don't know how much you know about the Gullah Geechee people, but between me and you, and this is probably a future episode, but the Gullah Geechee people, I know that they exist and still exist in certain parts within the Americas, a set of Black Americans, and they, from what I remember, they are the originators of a certain covert language that slaves used to speak. It's kind of weird hearing it. It kind of sounds like a tape recorder being played backwards, and it really is a testament to how slaves really weren't what people would and kind of still try to crack them up to be, and why the term enslaved people, I think, is definitely better as opposed to slaves. It shows that they were people who were enslaved, but more but nonetheless, really witty and adaptable people able to process and just perform covert information and activities to use a secretive language amongst yourselves as slaves to practice certain things and to carry out certain things. And I say it kind of lasted until this day, and it kind of carried on to this day, the whole Gullah Geechee speech. And I'm sure you've heard the song Double Dutch Bus, and the rapper Missy Elliott even did a kind of a sample of it. Her song is called Gossip Folks and shit like that. But the whole Easy Wizzy, and basically you've heard the song Double Dutch Bus, right?
Yeah.
And they're speaking in that weird language, the easy wheezy, easy, like that type of shit. That's where that originates from. You know what I mean? So I like the fact that this story kind of runs deep.
That is an awesome little piece of information you shared for the listeners out there. I didn't know that either. And I mean, that's awesome to know that, like, you still have it being kind of honored in culture today. And you're definitely going to see the adaptability and resilience of enslaved peoples play out through this story that without spoiling too much of what we're going to get into, a little foreshadowing, he goes on to become the first black sea captain, Navy captain in American history, and rightfully so, as you'll see as the story progresses.
Oh yeah, and let's let it progress.
Well, Robert Smalls was born into slavery on April 5th, 1839, in Beaufort, South Carolina. His mother, Lydia Polite, was an enslaved woman who served in a house servant capacity to the McKee family. Smalls was born in a small cabin located behind the main residence of Henry McKee at 511 Prince Street in Beaufort. Historical records suggest that Small's father may have been John McKee, the enslaver, a common circumstance that complicated relationships within the household. Growing up in Beaufort meant Smalls was exposed to the distinctive low-country Gullah culture of his mother. Although his existence as a house servant offered a relatively comfortable existence compared to field workers, Lydia Polite was keenly aware of the psychological and physical dangers inherent in slavery. Fearing her son would grow up without understanding the full brutality of their condition, she actively exposed Smalls to the grim realities of the plantation, including making him witness the frequent whippings endured by the field hands. This exposure profoundly shaped Smalls' early perspective, instilling a fierce defiance against the system, which frequently led to him being incarcerated in the local Beaufort jail. Alarmed by her son's increasingly rebellious behavior, which placed his life in jeopardy, Lydia Polite arranged with the McKee family to send Smalls away. At the age of 12, Smalls was sent to Charleston to be hired out as an enslaved laborer. In Charleston, Smalls found employment in various capacities, initially working as a waiter in a hotel, before finding consistent work in the city's bustling docks. He worked numerous jobs, mostly centered around Charleston Harbor, where he gained invaluable hands-on experience in maritime operations, learning stevedoring, sail rigging, and navigational skills. Through tireless effort, Smalls advanced through the ranks, first becoming a wheelman and eventually achieving the status of a highly skilled pilot for steamer ships. This expertise was essential in the complex, shallow waterways of the Low Country. Despite his qualifications and the trust placed in him by white ship owners and operators, Smalls was barred from holding the official title of pilot due to racial restrictions. This system of exploitation meant although Smalls earned a wage of $16 a week, he was only permitted to keep $1, with the balance appropriated by his enslaver, Henry McKee. This period of forced labor yielded an unexpected yet critical benefit. Smalls acquired propriety, high-value technical mastery of the Low Country ecosystem. His Gullah heritage, which provided him with intimate cultural and geographical knowledge, combined with his forced apprenticeship as a pilot in Charleston, meant he possessed detailed, localized intelligence regarding currents, mudbanks, and critically, Confederate fortifications and defenses. This skill set, developed within the constraints of slavery, transformed him from a piece of property into an indispensable strategic asset, a fact that would prove pivotal to his own freedom and the Union war effort. The subsequent success of his self-emancipation was not merely luck, but the direct result of having leveraged this specialized geographical and technical capital. While working in Charleston, Smalls met Hannah Jones, an enslaved hotel maid, and they married on December 24th, 1856. Although their marriage was not legally recognized by the state of South Carolina, they moved in together with their owner's permission and soon had 2 children, Elizabeth and Robert Jr. Smalls dedicated himself to saving money, hoping to buy his family's freedom. Hannah's owner demanded $800 for her freedom alone. By 1861, Smalls had managed to save $700. However, the astronomical price tag, coupled with the realization that such a sum would take him years to amass and still leave his own status uncertain, rendered conventional emancipation economically impossible. This financial roadblock created an overwhelming sense of urgency, solidifying his determination that the only viable solution to secure his family's uncertain future was the risky, illegal act of self-emancipation. This choice was, therefore, not simply a revolutionary act of defiance, but a pragmatic response to an impossible economic barrier, transforming freedom into a non-negotiable economic imperative tied directly to his family's security. Smalls promised Hannah that they would eventually escape from bondage.
And it just, I guess, shows a certain level of comfortability that we live in today, because it took me a while to learn that just to kind of process that $800, that's a hell of a pretty penny back in the day, especially for a slave, you know.
Well, if you were making $1 a week like he was, and you're only making $52 a year.
Damn, like, hmm. That's something else. But from the looks of it, what do you think it means, perhaps, before I give my opinion, that him being brought to see the brutality, basically being force fed, watching that didn't stop him from being rebellious? What do you think that says in your perspective?
I think it definitely helped fuel his future rebellious nature. And I think that his mother had the right idea that it was something he probably did need to be exposed to, because if he had never gone outside, he may have never seen it. He may have never understood it. That to be able to see it and witness it, I think put obviously his freedom he wanted to get for him and his wife was a personal matter. But I also think at the same time, that he was looking for any way he could to get back at the system that was set in place to make what was happening possible as well. I think it fueled him to be a politician later on for sure.
Well, yeah, same here, same here. I guess you can say it's just a product of showing how at the end of the day people are just built differently. It's just a lots of shit, just basically a sum of circumstances, the way we're treated, and the biochemical activities that are in our bodies that are really peculiar to each individual, you know?
And I think circumstances do play a big part of it too. That in a sense, I mean, he used what he had around him, the resources, to build a knowledge and skill that would come to be something that later on not only got his freedom, but would make him a hero. And I think because, as I said, I've been writing another podcast that we're going to do down the road about greatness and what makes greatness, and part of it really comes down to being in the right place in the right time. That he could have had all this drive and he could have been as determined as he wanted to, but without being able to be in that set of circumstances that allowed him to learn and develop the skills he did, he may never have become the hero that he is known as today.
Right. Because truthfully, there's no way you can tell me that there's lots of people who, seeing something like that, it just would have inculcated fear in them and placed them just in a subservient mode.
Without a doubt. And I mean, I think the fact that made him rebellious definitely helps him later on, but I could see his mother's fear too, that it's like, oh no, you are going to get yourself killed trying to rebel against the system the way you are right now. So I also think you got to kind of thank his mom for putting him in a situation where he managed to build up those skills then too, and understanding that he's going to rebel. Let me make sure he rebels with the right tools.
Yeah. And just anytime I'm kind of in the environment of hearing or reading something about slavery, I just can't help but think how it affects our personalities and stuff till this day. And it makes me think about how it kind of makes me think that this did a lot to give Black Americans the whole chin up mentality when things are going south, the whole push, just the whole push through, survive through storms type of thing. Because I mean, to be a slave is to have a lot of sick shit normalized, and to have something like there are people being raped on the plantation, there are people having their children and family members sold away from them. With shit going on like that, it's just simply impossible to let something like you woke up on the wrong side of bed get on your nerves.
When something as simple as even your marriage isn't even legally recognized. 100%, I get what you're saying. And I think not only does it help you not have that wake up on the wrong side of the bed, but you really did open my eyes during when we were talking about Frida Kahlo and the fact that it kind of allowed you to be freer with who you were too. And I never even thought about it that way when you said, well, you already have all these stigmas on you for being not white, so why not let your flag fly and be with who you want to be with and love who you want to love?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely something I see within just older Black gay people, because that's the subject we were on when it comes to, sister, I think no, Sister Rosetta Tharpe wasn't it, but It was an old blues lady who they just did a movie about. She was kind of heavy set, but she was bisexual and shit. And yeah, just really out and about it. But yeah, they definitely gave no fucks about that. Like James Baldwin was I mean, from what I heard, he was flaming, you know.
Right, right. And I mean, it's so funny to think that like you said, being persecuted almost does allow you to have more liberties to be who you are. Where you look at the white people of the time, it's like, oh no, that's not right. They can't be kissing other girls. But it's like, girl, deep down in your heart, your husband is a piece of shit and you don't like him and you want to make out with your best friend Fran, but you can't do it because society won't let you.
Yeah, I mean, and truthfully, I think a lot of that shit is implemented by society. Like we've about this before, but I mean, in the 50s, I don't know if it was necessarily a lot of them who had those covert desires as far as women wanting to make out with their friends. I think the whole, like, we were just talking about how men and women are really just really separated, and a lot of that has to do with politics. Like, it's data that shows that men are leaning way far right, more far right than they have in a long time, and women, the same thing is happening with them on leaning far left. And that's something that's been in the making for a while. And I say that to say the whole girl on girl culture is being as accepted as it is today, to where I can't scroll down my timeline without having a chick talk about how she just loves eating pussy or some shit. That's been years and years in the making. Like it really kind of took off in the 90s, and we talked about the movie Bound with Jennifer Tilly, even the movie I showed you, Players Club, and it's a group, Drew Hill. They did a song about somebody sleeping in my bed. The whole typical, I expect that my girlfriend is cheating on me. But with the video, they kind of gave it a twist, and the girlfriend was cheating on him, but not with a man. Hint, hint. So, and that's really took off in the 90s and kind of sprouted from there. And Katy Perry didn't make it any better, you know?
That's fair. That's fair, without a doubt.
Pretty audacious, and she isn't the only one, I suppose.
You're right on that because when you want to come back down to pure audacity, Bert Smalls was one audacious motherfucker, and I got to give him my hats off to him for what he's about to do in our story next. You see, the outbreak of the Civil War happened April of 1861, right? And it dramatically changed the context of Small's forced labor. He was assigned to steer the CSS Planter, a 147-foot wood-burning side-wheel steamer. The ship, owned by John Ferguson, a Charleston businessman, was leased to the Confederate military, primarily functioning as a transport for arms, ammunition, supplies, dispatches, and men between Charleston and the coastal fortifications. Smalls was the vessel's de facto pilot, and he was relied upon by the non-Southern merchant sailors hired as contractors to navigate the complex harbor safely. While piloting the planter around the busy harbor, Smalls gained critical detailed knowledge of Confederate defense networks, including the location of minefields, the required navigational maneuvers, and the specific signaling protocol necessary to pass fortifications like Fort Sumner. Simultaneously, he observed the growing strength of the Union naval blockade outside the harbor. By early May 1862, Smalls formulated a detailed and audacious plan to steal the vessel. This plot was a communal undertaking. Smalls recognized that any escape attempt required the inclusion of the families of the 7 enslaved black crewmen, as they were risking their lives just as much as he was. The group debated various plans to commandeer the ship and steam it out to the protection of the U.S. Navy. Smalls believed that, with the white officers distracted and trusting of the black crew, an escape at night offered a slim chance of success. The vessel was lightly armed with a 32-pound pivot gun on the bow and a 24-pound howitzer astern, weapons the enslaved crew had been trained to use. The opportunity presented itself on the night of May 12, 1862, when the 3 white officers of the planter went ashore for the evening, leaving Smalls and the enslaved crewmen unattended. A mass lapse in Confederate protocol. Around 3 a.m. on May 13th, Smalls and his fellow freedom seekers prepared the ship for departure, firing up the boilers. Smalls, demonstrating remarkable composure and resourcefulness, donned the wide-brimmed straw hat of the white captain, Charles J. Relier, to disguise his identity and mimic the captain's mannerisms. He navigated the ship to a designated wharf to pick up their waiting families. The group consisted of 16 to 17 people in total, 9 men, 5 women, and 3 children. The most perilous stage was navigating the gauntlet of Confederate forces. Smalls steered the planter past the major Confederate strongholds of Fort Sumter and Fort Moultrie. By utilizing his intimate knowledge of the harbor and providing the correct sequence of military signals, Smalls successfully performed a dangerous ruse that allowed the ship to pass the unsuspecting rebels without raising the alarm. Once safely past the range of the Confederate guns, the crew raised a white flag and surrendered the vessel. With its valuable cargo of arms, the Union blockading squadron, once safely past the range of the Confederate guns, the crew raised a white flag and surrendered the vessel with its valuable cargo of arms to the Union blockading squadron. In fewer than 4 hours, Robert Smalls had achieved a decisive act of self-emancipation, simultaneously executing a military operation of significant strategic value. Smalls' daring capture of the planter had immediate wide-ranging ramifications. Let me start off by saying, on a side note, the U.S. Navy, up until 1900, gave prizes for captured enemy vessels. Smalls did receive a prize for the vessel, and when they valued the vessel, they gave him $4,000, which was about the equivalent of $100,000 today. Now, because he was a black man, even the federal government decided that it wasn't really worth what it was worth. It was estimated that it was worth 3 or 4 or 5 times that amount, and nobody really ever said anything to Smalls. Although I think when you think about it, Smalls might have just been happy to be free with some money in his pocket. But was it right? I don't think so at all. Well, upon surrendering the vessel, Smalls did more than just deliver the ship. He provided Union commanders with crucial detailed intelligence regarding the Charleston defenses, including the sensitive signal code book used by Confederate harbor vessels. The transfer of this operational intelligence represented a profound security breach for the Confederate defense of Charleston, immediately compromising their ability to control traffic and forcing a costly and difficult revamp of their entire harbor security protocol. The loss of the planter itself, along with its cargo of artillery, arms, and ammunition, further weakened the military supply line of the Confederates. After the capture, the Confederates were so incensed by the loss, they placed a $4,000 bounty on Smalls' head. The defection of the planter made Smalls an immediate national celebrity and a powerful propaganda tool for the Union. Union papers heralded him as a hero, while Confederate papers chastised the carelessness of the white officers. Smalls' actions transcended symbolism. It provided tangible proof of the strategic competence and unwavering allegiance of enslaved black men to the Union cause. In August 1862, Smalls traveled to Washington, D.C., where he met directly with President Abraham Lincoln and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. During this consequential meeting, Smalls forcefully lobbied administration to allow black men to formally enlist in the Union Army, a policy Lincoln had previously rejected. The successful complex military operation demonstrated by Smalls provided the necessary political validation for this monumental shift. Soon after the meeting, Secretary Stanton ordered the recruitment of 5,000 formerly enslaved men to fight for the Union, directly leading to the formation of regiments such as the 1st and 2nd South Carolina Colored Infantry. Chronology confirms that the planter defection served as a catalyst for black military enlistment, fundamentally altering the trajectory of the Civil War.
Yeah, and that really wraps up why you say he deserves a bigger footnote because, I mean, it's all right there. That move, I mean, without Robert Smalls, the Civil War truthfully and honestly could have went either way if you think about it.
Without a doubt, it could have. And I did some research the other day about like Gettysburg, for instance. And if the South had won Gettysburg, then the North probably would have quit the war. They'd have come in and gotten a truce done with the South because they were tired of the war at that point. Then you would have had us rushing to the West as 2 different countries trying to scoop up as much land as we could. We probably wouldn't have never gone to World War I or II. We'd have been 2 super fractured countries that were always at war with each other, that had the tightest border military you'd ever seen. It would have been like what North and South Korea is today, only without a dictator. I mean, it would have been insane, the trajectory of not just American history, but all of world history for the next 250 years had it not been for what happened in that moment with that one man's act of rebellion.
Yep. It's like we talk about all the time. That butterfly effect shit is so real. Just like you said, American history in general, and just thinking about, because I think about shit on a deep level to the point to where it's like not just the politics and shit, but like we talk about pop culture moment in movies and shit. Like would those movies and things like that even exist? Would the environment that they facilitated in, would they be too war torn? You know what I
Right. Would
mean?
Hollywood even be there? The one thing that I can say doing that research, they said the North would be actually more progressive because we wouldn't have had the right-leaning, religious-based zeal of the Southern politics being intermingled with ours. So you'd have lost a lot of things, but you'd have also gained a lot of things in certain areas. I feel like anybody born in the South, I'm sorry, it would have sucked.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, especially as a damn minority. I mean, shit.
It already wasn't a cakewalk in the timeline we live in.
I mean, yeah, but damn, just to think how anything could get worse. It's like, and I swear this is going to be my last time bringing up Chris Rock, but he says when people look at shit from the 1950s that shows black people having dogs sicked on them and shit like that, water hoses being sprayed on them, they think that's to show the peak of American racism. He's like, no, that's to show white people being nice, nicer than they were being in the 30s and 50s. There were some black people looking down from heaven who died in the 30s and 40s, looking at the 50s like them niggas got it good down there.
Must be nice, right?
Like, yeah, it was to think of how anything could get worse than that. I mean, it's possible, but it'd probably be some like medieval type shit. Who knows?
And you wonder too, I always wonder with these stories that you got to think he had to have looked back, right, and been like, man, if only 12-year-old me sitting in that jail cell could see me now, we fucking did it.
Yeah, I hear you. You gotta have those nigga we made it moments. It's gotta pop up in some way or form. But great leadership skills, of course, eventually get everyone on board and to take everyone into consideration. That so shows a lot, you know.
It speaks to the mark of his character for sure. That, as we said on this many, many times, most of the guys we cover, I think part of what makes greatness is, and it can be bad or good, but what makes somebody great in a good sense that helps the world is someone that has a community set mind, someone that's not thinking about their personal gain, but a way they can help the others around them as well. I think it speaks volumes to the fact that not only did he help work out a plan with the other men on board the ship with him, but he also worked out a plan to save all of their families as well.
Yeah, and the whole white hat thing, that was, you know what I mean? Nice little symbolism. I mess with it. And just the whole act, audacious as hell. Nice little vocab. I keep coming across words that, well, I won't even say that I don't know, but they just, they at least make you think, like, okay, what does that mean? Audacious isn't one of them, but it's just a signal of reading, you know?
Right. And I feel what you're saying because I've been running into that lately too. I've been reading a bunch of different history books, and these guys will use words, like you said, where it's like, okay, I have to stop and think about what that means because you might have only seen that word used 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, like certain words that motherfuckers who either write or scroll books would know,
Where you're
stuff
sitting
like
here pulling out your thesaurus, like, okay, I see you, motherfucker.
right. Yeah, it can get like that. But national celebrity, it gives me a good view because I like to learn about people who were, and specifically black civil rights figures, you could say, in the 19th century, you know, because of course the 20th century is when things really started to shift. But I like to see some of those people who kind of laid the foundation in the century prior.
The pioneers of it, that there's so much more than Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. Not to take away from them, because those are amazing figures in history. But when you start seeing all the stories that come out, like William Parker or Robert Smalls,
Yeah, and like you say, Douglass is bar none the biggest black civil rights figure in America of that time. But and of course you got Harriet Tubman as a close number two. But to learn about everybody else, it just makes you see the whole scope of the time that they weren't outliers, so to speak.
and the amount of people that were using, like we said with William Parker and Robert Smalls, that they were using their skills just as much as Tubman and Douglas were to further the cause in the way that they knew how. That Robert Smalls knew ships. So what he do? He took one and he took the families of all of his buddies on there with him. William Parker, he knew how to fight. So what he do? He fought and fought and fought until he couldn't fight anymore. Not everybody's going to be a politician, and I respect that. But it's nice to know that no matter what your skill set is, as you said, you're not an outlier. You're just helping the cause in a different way.
Right, because not to compare that it's a competition or anything, but like we said, without this guy, centuries of world history completely different, seen through completely different lenses.
You wouldn't
And
have the Buffalo Soldiers. And to
yeah,
piggyback off of a guy you like to bring up, we wouldn't have that smash hit by Bob Marley.
right. I just thought about that as soon as you said you wouldn't have the Buffalo Soldiers. I just zoomed my mind into like, God damn, that song wouldn't even exist.
It's wild to think that one person could have that much effect on the trajectory of history as a whole.
That song would just be thin air.
And to have that
And
trajectory, but be a name that isn't necessarily taught in schools the way it should be either, which is the sad part about it.
right, right. Yeah, that's definitely the case. And like I said, not to compare and compete, but really it's like would can you say that Frederick Douglass, I'm sure they probably have butterfly effect like situations with them, like if they didn't do this, certain things in world history would look the same. Like Frederick Douglass was a man who debated presidents. I mean, the man was a public figure who got married to a white woman during times of slavery. Like rebellion isn't the word. Like opening up like swinging doors wide open isn't the word. That's some controversial shit to say the very least. But to say that centuries of world history would be different if it wasn't for you, it just makes you think like, who else can say that?
Exactly, exactly. And at the time, did you even know you were doing that? I know Frederick Douglass had to know that what he was doing really was big, very big at the time, and something that'd be big going forward. But Robert Smalls at the time, I got the feeling in the research that it was literally just in his mind, he wasn't thinking past, well, I'll be free. And to think that you weren't even thinking about, I'm going to change the entire landscape of history for the next 250 years. You're like, I'm done with this. I'm gonna get my family, I'm gonna get my friends' families, and we're gonna go.
Exactly, exactly. So, in other words, I picture him for whatever reason, and maybe it's because he played in a movie that was roughly around the Civil War time, kind of as a war figure. But Ving Rhames, I kind of see him as that type of. I kind of see him playing that character because it kind of fits into the whole a black captain in blue, and I'm sure that's what the movie would be named.
See, look, I'm telling you, Hollywood needs to get a hold of us. We're writing this shit for them right now.
What what else do they need? They sleeping. They sleep. I think we should they
See,
should come a knocking and hopefully one day they will.
I'm telling you, not, and I think a black Captain in Blue would be the perfect name. And I think this is the perfect movie because you got a man that literally changed the entire course of history in so many ways, and also was the first black naval captain in American history. Following his self emancipation, Smalls was immediately employed as a pilot for the Union Navy's blockading squadron, effectively utilizing his expert knowledge of the low country waterways and Confederate defenses. The captured vessel, renamed the USS Planter because, people weren't super original back then, was converted to Union service, and Smalls continued to serve on board ultimately participating in approximately 17 military engagements through the Civil War. Small's commitment extended beyond piloting the Planter. In April 1863, during the failed Union assault on Charleston Harbor, he served as a pilot aboard the ironclad Keokuk. The Keokuk took severe beating in a gunnery duel with Fort Sumter, and Smalls was injured, further solidifying his reputation for bravery under fire. His most significant combat contribution occurred during an engagement at Folly Island Creek, South Carolina, 2 months after the Keokuk incident. During very hot fire, the white captain of the Planter became so demoralized that he reportedly hid in a coal bunker. Smalls immediately assumed command, steering the vessel safely through the engagement. For this display of valor and leadership, Smalls was promoted, eventually attaining the position of captain of the Planter in December 1863. The promotion made him the first black pilot in the U.S. Navy and the first black naval captain, earning him a salary of $150 a month, making him one of the highest paid black soldiers during the conflict. And let's say that was a lot more than the $4 a month he was getting before. Despite his heroic achievement and operational command, his official military rank remained complicated by institutional racial constraints. While he acted as and was called captain, the U.S. Navy did not officially grant him the rank of pilot because at the time, formal Naval Academy graduation was a requirement. To ensure he received the appropriate captain's pay, Smalls instead was commissioned in service as a second lieutenant in the 1st South Carolina Colored Infantry Regiment, even though his service remained primarily maritime. This institutional resistance to granting Smalls full professional status was paralleled by a protracted dispute over his compensation for the capture of the Planter. Congress had passed a bill in 1862 authorizing Smalls and his crew to receive half of the appraised value of the Confederate vessel. Smalls initially received $1,500. However, the initial appraisal of the Planter was consistently criticized as being intentionally undervalued. A key 1883 Naval Affairs Committee report confirmed that the 1862 valuation was absurdly low and estimated the vessel's fair worth to be more than $60,000. The evidence clearly indicates that while Small's additional service and strategic value were celebrated through pensions and ceremonial rank, the institutional bureaucracy actively restricted his economic compensation. This sustained denial of fair compensation, which was calculated according to his value as a military asset, illustrates the pervasiveness of institutional racism, placed a racialized ceiling on the economic rewards available to black soldiers regardless of extraordinary merit. Smalls received no further payment until 1900, when Congress passed a statute granting him a total of $5,000 for the capture, less the $1,500 already paid. Many historians and contemporaries still felt his amount was substantially less than he was due. Small's service and rank were finally acknowledged in 1897 when a special act of Congress granted him a pension equal to that of a Navy captain. While Small's dedication to fighting inequality began long before he held political office, in 1864, while overseeing the overhaul and refitting of the Planter in Philadelphia, Smalls was arrested for refusing to vacate his seat on a segregated streetcar. In response to this discriminatory act, Smalls immediately organized and led a powerful boycott of Philadelphia's transit system. This decisive action demonstrated his commitment to nonviolent political pressure and his capacity to organize civil rights action across geographic terrains. The boycott successfully resulted and the desegregation of Philadelphia's public transit system by 1867. This episode highlights that Small's commitment to equality was immediate and practical, showing that his political consciousness and activism were fully developed concurrently with his military service and predating the start of formal Reconstruction in the South. His experience revealed that racial segregation was a national, not solely Southern problem.
And I like that his story has a moment that reflects that because it's something that later becomes obvious, but it's just not shown enough that truthfully in the North, I mean, I don't know if you could say they treated blacks worse because that's something that I feel is overused whenever something is bad on another plane or in another field of activities too, people just automatically say that's worse. But I mean, let's just say it wasn't too big of a picnic for blacks in the North also. So the fact that his life shows that, or he has a moment in his life show that, I mean, the conspiracy in me can't help but wonder, is that part of the reason why he's kind of doesn't get the due diligence of what his name is owed.
That in a way he embarrassed the North by their actions and their responses to him, and that they want to bury him so that they don't have to face the fact that they were just as bad as the South in certain ways.
Because I'm not gonna lie, up until I think it was seventh grade, that's when even and I'll never forget, we had a teacher. Shout out Mr. LaRue if you're listening out there somewhere, but he was our history teacher basically, and he was like just going over how we have this view of the North carrying on a white horse with shiny armor, bearing responsibility to carry out the moral duty to extinguish slavery in the South and in America overall. And it just wasn't like that. Like that was my first exposition, and I'm sure a lot of kids' exposition to what the Civil War was really all about and shit like that, and how well he didn't say this for the record. He didn't go this deep into telling us, but how I learned later on that Abraham Lincoln was even recorded as saying that if he could preserve the Union and keep slavery, he would.
Exactly, exactly. That he wanted to preserve it over abolishing slavery immediately. And not just that, people sleep on the fact Lincoln reportedly used the N word and told racially insensitive jokes. He supported colonization, the idea of encouraging freed black Americans to immigrate to Africa or Central America. He also opposed social and political equality, and he made statements that flat out suggested he believed in physical and intellectual differences between white and black races, and that the whites were the superior race. That if that's they call him the great emancipator, and the great emancipator was really just a closeted gay bigot.
Yeah, and between me and you, back in his day, the thing to do when you wanted to defame somebody, in particular somebody who was white, is to say that they were black or Negro or that they had some black blood in their family somewhere. And they were saying that about Abraham Lincoln, that he was Melungeon, and that is basically a tribe of black Indians. And they would have little cartoon animations drawing him as basically trying to show him as black. And an interesting fact about it, they would have him dress up in Arabic garb. And that just basically transfers to the whole, I'm sure the name Moor
The
rings a bell.
Moors, yeah, yeah. I remember you talking about the symbol monkey, the clapping monkey was kind of based off of that same caricature.
Yeah, how that's kind of a way for them to low key make fun of black people, basically like take advantage of the fact that even not a lot of black people know their history, basically. It's like a guy who really presented that information to me said it's a form of evidence that they know who we are. Like they know who we are. We don't know who we are. Shit like that. Even there'd be slave ships named Blackamoor and a black boxer named Tom Molyneux, who they would call Molyneux the Moor, shit like that. And I know you're familiar with Othello the Moor.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So that's pretty interesting to me, and you can't help but think about different examples of that. From what I hear, I mean, Europe is riddled with examples of that. People who have a black background in their family. They say that about Prince Charles, and there's a pub over there called the Black Boy Pub based off of Prince Charles.
I've heard that too. And then I think it was, I want to say Victoria or Elizabeth, one of them that was supposedly supposed to be half black.
Yeah, there's different examples that you're always gonna have little instances of shit like that. But nice payday for our guy. I guess we can say that was a nice little stride in a unfair life.
and he deserves so much more. But at the end of the day, I think, like I said, what he got was the equivalent of $100,000. So that's not a bad start for a man that just got his freedom as well, I suppose. Making the money he was making, what did I say again, $156 a month? That's no slouch of a salary either. I mean, you think about it though too. I definitely think you're dead on your interpretation of why they kind of try to bury him in the history books, because you look at that payment they gave him and that scant amount, and you look at the fact it took them until almost 1900 to give him the rank of captain. And you could just say, well, that was the military. It was wrong, but it was the way these systems were set up in the military. That's not representative of all of America. But I think you're dead accurate, because once you see the arrest on the streetcar, then it becomes, well, what do you say for that?
Right, right. Yeah, at the end of the day, people, as I often say, they're more motivated by their selfish desires than they like to admit to. And truthfully, if somebody's telling a story, oftentimes they're going to tell it in a way that makes them look best.
You're 100% right on that. I will say though, and I think you're gonna really enjoy part two on this, because he does go from being the soldier hero, captain of the Navy hero, to being a politician and a civil rights leader. I think it was kind of nice to see that precursor with him organizing a boycott. And it was really fascinating doing the research on this to see just how a boycott in the 19th century worked.
Yeah, for a fact. And I don't know. The 19th century, for whatever reasons, I mean, we can act like it wasn't as great of a century as the 20th century, and it wasn't, just being truthful. But with that being said, we can still learn a lot from it and really see it as an awesome precursor, not just in the civil rights matters and shit like that, but just in all types of ways, an awesome precursor to the century that followed, the century that basically shaped the life that we're living in now, you know?
Right. How at the end of the Civil War in 1865, you finally got motherfuckers that to realize, oh, sanitation matters when it comes to doing surgery. You know, you look at the Civil War, all the people that lost arms and legs and shit and got gangrene, all those doctors that had to sit there and be like, son of a bitch, you mean if I had just washed my hands and my equipment, everything would have been fine? And the way that that leads into, as you said, the 20th century and the developments in medicine and technology and just everything that we built upon that we had discovered in the 19th century in a way is just mind blowing. And then you look at speaking of sanitation and shit, I did find this out. Let me find this again. I had it saved because it fucked my head up. I was like, no fucking way. So you've heard of Listerine and shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Listerine is named after Dr. Lister, Dr. Joseph Lister, whose groundbreaking work in antiseptic surgery in 1865 used carbolic acid to kill germs and prevent post-op infection. In 1879, a doctor and pharmacist in St. Louis, Missouri, formulated a new antiseptic and named it Listerine to recognize his pivotal role in proving the invisible germs that cause disease and the antiseptics could kill them. So, kind of a fun tie-in. Did you know Listerine was invented in St. Louis?
Damn, ain't that some shit? I mean, I would say, or at least I would want to say it explains a lot, but evidently it doesn't because, I mean, not to say it's particular to motherfuckers here that even we have a worse rate of motherfuckers here, but I mean, I've ran into too many motherfuckers with horrible mouth odors, you know what I mean? For them to be in the city where Listerine was invented. Let's just say that.
Right, right. It's a little wild. It's a little wild to think about that.
It's kind of like something that somebody who's from out of town would really use against us. Like, motherfucker, you from where Listerine was invented? You ain't got no reason to have us had a stank mouth, like shit like that.
Right, right. Use that shit. Y'all made it.
Right, right. Like, and honestly, they would have an excuse. Like, I'll say it too if I wasn't from St. Louis.
Now we're just giving motherfuckers out there in the world some fuel for the fire, for sure.
Unfortunately, like, yeah, it's a lot of battle rappers from St. Louis. I hope that's not a future punchline.
Watch,
We
watch. It's gonna be now.
We shall see. But I think you wrapped this up pretty nice and tightly in the Jerry Springer grab onto my glasses fashion that you always do.
Well, I think that's a fine idea, sir. So I'm going to close by saying this will conclude part one of the life of Robert Smalls. We've covered his beginnings, his time serving in the Confederate Navy, his incredible escape and seizure of the CSS Planter, and his subsequent time with the Federal Navy, where he became the first black captain in America's history. I mean, he was a goddamn civil rights leader, and he's really setting the tone for what's going to come next. When we resume part two, we're going to cover Small's later years, including how he used his newfound fame as a war hero to become a U.S. representative and further his civil rights activism. Thank you for joining us on the Case So You Didn't Know podcast. And Mr. Talberto, anything you'd like to close with? Anything you'd like to plug? Any closing ideas? Any final thoughts?
Just keep looking out for us. Keep plugging us in, keeping us in the mainstream or closer to the mainstream as we'd like to get. Subscribe, assholes. Subscribe to that YouTube page. Don't take shit but a click of a button. It's a joke, but it's not a joke. And all bullshit aside, as always, OLBERT Simpson is my Instagram. Hit a guy up. I'll talk back. Follow me. Follow us everywhere we go. Leave the cheese, and you'll definitely be caught in the next one.